Preprints and journal publications. Both are research outputs in a narrative style that look very similar. Are they really so similar, or are they actually very different beasts? Before we begin, let's define each of these so we're all on the same page. A preprint is a scientific manuscript posted online to a preprint server prior to journal organised peer review. They are free to authors and readers. A journal article is a scientific manuscript published in an academic journal following journal organised peer review. There is a charge for access to either institutions, authors, or readers. So from the definitions, it's already clear that there are some similarities and some differences. Let's dive into these more. The most obvious difference here is that only one of these has undergone peer review, but that isn't actually as straightforward as it first appears. When a preprint is first posted to a preprint server, it indeed has not undergone any journal organised peer review, but preprints can be peer reviewed by an ever-increasing number of preprint review services. It's also highly likely that most preprints have been reviewed by colleagues prior to posting on a preprint server. This is a form of peer review. It's also not clear when any individual preprint is actually posted. Some will have undergone journal organised peer review and then posted to a preprint server after rejection or to speed up dissemination of the work whilst working on revisions. And so a preprint may very well have been peer reviewed, perhaps even peer reviewed by a journal prior to posting on a preprint server. Another obvious difference is in appearance. A preprint may often look less polished when compared to journal articles. This is because journal articles have undergone copy editing and are typeset. In contrast, a preprint is not typeset. However, some preprint servers provide options for readers to customize the layout of the preprint, for example by placing figures in line or at the end according to preference. Now, one major point of difference is in access. Access to journal articles comes with a financial cost. This could be for readers, who often pay for 48 hours access. It could be for authors through article processing charges, which can be up to $12,000 per paper. It may also come by charging institutions, restricting access to only those fortunate enough to work at those institutions that can afford to pay high subscriptions. Preprints, however, are completely free for authors and readers. They cost around 1% of journal articles, in the tens rather than the thousands of dollars. And this improved access has another benefit. Both preprints and journal articles are citable outputs. They can be cited in other research outputs, in grant applications, and in tenure packets or job applications. However, as preprints are more accessible, they provide a citation benefit. Articles first posted as preprints are associated with 19 to 50% increase in citations over those articles that do not have an associated preprint. And these citations are not separate. Citations to a preprint and its journal version are additional, which is great for researchers. Another similarity is in their permanence. Both preprints and journal articles are permanent records. They're both assigned digital object identifiers, DOIs. They're also both indexed by academic indexes such as EuropeMC and Google Scholar. This also makes them both findable. But what about when something goes wrong? For journals, an article must be retracted. The exact process depends on the journal policies, but this is a formal process that can often require the agreement of all of the original authors. It's also known that this process can take a long time, even after issues are raised. One paper took over 20 years to be retracted. For preprints, different preprint servers will have differing policies, and the removal of a preprint is referred to as withdrawing rather than retracting, although this is effectively the same outcome. There is also some data to suggest that retraction of preprinted articles occurs more quickly than retraction of non-preprinted articles, an average of 278 days compared to 839. How about the flip side to this? Every researcher has experienced the phenomenon that occurs when you press submit, the point of no return after which you are guaranteed to find typos and other little issues with your work. With journal articles, once your work is published, it cannot be changed without issuing a correction. This is only generally done for big changes such as adding an author or correcting an issue with a figure. In contrast, a preprint can simply be updated by the authors. Even better, they can update a preprint as much as they want. This could be to correct small errors, update work in response to ongoing feedback, or even adding entirely new analyses and authors in. One area in which preprints are not as positive is in relation to data availability. Currently, data is often not included in a preprint as authors hold back sharing their data until they have a formally published paper. This may be due to a fear of others building on their work or even a lack of collegiality. But this is one area in which trust is reduced for preprints. So what about trust? How does this differ for preprints and journal articles? For journal articles, most people rely on the journal brand and presence of peer review as the main markers in determining trust or reliability. However, preprints force readers to look further, and some platforms, such as bioRxiv, include a dashboard of trust markers that are more varied than peer review alone. What about the content? Does this differ between a preprint and its published version? Data does show that preprints undergo limited changes when they are eventually published. In general, published versions have slightly better reporting indicators and slightly smaller confidence intervals. But as we've covered in other videos, these differences are not substantive changes to conclusions. Of course, there will always be individual examples where there are significant changes. However, according to current evidence, most preprint article pairs are very similar. A journal article currently represents the version of record. The version of record is the official, definitive, and final published copy. There are increasing questions over how important the version of record is. Primarily, those most concerned with this seem to be publishers and librarians. Your average researcher does not appear to care so much, if they even know what a version of record actually is. But the version of record does have a bigger impact on research careers. Perhaps unsurprisingly, given who cares most about this. The biggest and most important difference between a preprint and journal article is that the latter is globally recognised for career advancement. Indeed, this is perhaps the single biggest barrier to wider preprint adoption currently. However, ultimately, there is little substantive difference between a preprint and a published version beyond typesetting. The possibilities to experiment and break free from the rigid structure imposed by journal articles is a great advantage that has the potential to improve trust in research, academic culture, and much more. If you want to learn more about preprints, then check out Rippling Ideas, an advocacy and consulting organisation led by the world-leading preprint experts with a people and evidence-driven approach that you won't find anywhere else. Head to ripplingideas.org to learn more about preprints and see even more resources. Sign up to our newsletter to keep up to date with our latest efforts and a monthly roundup of relevant news. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button below too.